Dinosaurs lived colorful lives. But exactly what colors were they? That's what Phil Manning's aiming to find out. To get to the bottom of dinosaur color,
that's interesting.
He's driven to turn one of the world's most sophisticated ray guns onto one of the world's most valuable fossils. Whether you're predator or prey, sneaking around or strutting your stuff, you live and die by color. But nobody knows how all dinosaurs really looked. To help sort it out, Phil Manning wants to crack a dinosaur's chemical color code. For 4 years, Phil has collaborated with scientists at Stanford University. They've been using a machine called the synchrotron to blast through barriers to scientific progress. It sees in a bold new light, firing highly focused beams 1,000,000 times stronger than a chest X-ray. It can etch microchips, explore subatomic particles, and now Phil will try to put dinosaur color under its searchlight. When it comes to paleontology, Phil Manning doesn't color within the lines. In his pursuit of real knowledge, he sets his sights on unconventional disciplines that take him from cradle to grave, exposing dinosaurs as you've never seen them before. And now he's off on a new adventure, a worldwide quest to find dinosaur color. Phil and colleague paleoanatomist Peter Dodson begin their mission to find the perfect fossil to unlock the chemistry of color.
China is the frontier of dinosaur discoveries, so I'm hoping for a lucky break.
Looks like we're nearly there.
First stop, the eastern province of Shandong. About 2 years ago, paleontologists hit the jackpot, uncovering the largest dinosaur boneyard in history. Nearly 8,000 bones. Restorers have a job for life, putting the pieces back together again. Most of the bones will stay right here in 3 new museums that will form the heart of Dinosaur City. Good thing, because these massive bones don't easily budge. Just the thigh bone of this plant-eating hadrosaur is as big as a man. For all we know, these 2-story-high dinos may have worn a parade of dazzling colors. Phil's searching for evidence. But they're just the opening act. Around the corner, the main event, in a covered plot half the size of a football field. This is the first time China has allowed Western cameras inside.
Can you believe what we're looking at, Phil?
Unbelievable, actually. That is incredible.
Can you imagine?
For a paleontologist, this is Giant Stadium.
Wow, look at the size of those bones. There's a femur there.
Paleontologists base whole careers on specimens like these, and Phil's hoping that somewhere in this giant haystack lies the tiny colored needle he's looking for.
I can't get over the size of this site.
This is China, Phil. Anything goes in China.
No doubt, many new dinosaurs await discovery here.
Oh, Phil, this humerus is 90 centimeters long.
But how it got here is not so humorous.
What sort of event can emplace this much bone on one vast bedding plane? It defies logic.
Well, it must have been a bad day.
Really,
on a
really
Cretaceous.
bad day.
Yes, yeah.
The remains, excavated from 7 distinct layers, suggest that catastrophe struck here over and over again. possibly flash floods, tsunamis. The rushing water may have tumbled the dinosaurs like a giant washing machine, tearing them limb from limb. Soon after, their flesh rotted away.
I'm fascinated but frustrated. For colour, I need to find chemical traces from outside of the dinosaurs, not from colourless bones. But bones are all that's left here.
So Dinosaur City lacks the local colour that Phil's looking for, but China has plenty more to offer. Next stop, Liaoning, about a day's drive from Beijing. In the 90s, this farming community became a boom town for paleo prospectors, thanks to one man's lucky strike. He found the first dinosaur with feathers. People pull up fossils here all the time, although nothing quite so groundbreaking. Paleontologist Yu Hailu accompanies Phil beyond the petrified Jurassic forest to meet Li Yinfang, the farmer who changed the rules, forcing a rethink of how dinosaurs look.
Because it's very clear you have the perfect eye for finding fossils.
It's an honor to meet you.
In 1994, Li Yinfang split a slab of rock and made history. To his delight, the stone revealed the complete skeleton of a dinosaur, about the size of a turkey and covered in feathers. Sinosauropteryx wore a downy coat with almost furry plumage. Some modern birds, like the kiwi, have similar feathers, bolstering the evidence that birds descended from dinosaurs. Since Li Yinfang's discovery, amateur and pro fossil hunters have flocked here, scoring a bounty of feathered dinosaur fossils. Strange and imaginatively colored ones like the four-winged Microraptor, or the one nicknamed Dave the Fuzzy Raptor. Some collect them for science, others to feather their nests, selling them on the lucrative black market. Chinese farmers, barely able to scratch out a living in their fields, dig secret pits to reach the fossil-bearing sediments 20 meters below.
So what sort of price do the fossils go for on the open market?
They are about $1,000 or even more.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's literally a year's salary?
Yeah, yeah.
So it really is worth taking big risks for?
Yes.
I think I'm ready to risk my life and limb because the thought of finding a fossil from the lower Cretaceous of China does sort of whet my appetite, and I'm willing to jump into a farmer's hole to find a fossil.
But be very careful.
Down the shaft, Phil travels back in time.
Ever felt that you're getting older? I know I am.
The rabbit hole hides a weird wonderland. An entire community of 120-million-year-old animals and plants, pressed into the Liaoning sediments. In this ancient environment, called the J-hole habitat, lived many of the feathered dinosaurs. Distant volcanoes rained down fine ash over many of the dinosaur carcasses and preserved every detail of their feathers.
Stop! I just can't figure how the farmers who dug these holes did it. I have huge respect for them because it's really narrow down here.
It's like picking through the layers of a finely written book. We've got to be double jointed. Come to Daddy. Right, let's see. Oh, major fall. Now, that's interesting. It's a tiny little fish in the bottom of a hole. Oh, it's so friable.
Phil caught a fish, but fish aren't known for their feathers.
One beautiful low Cretaceous fish. Bit past its sell-by date.
So no luck down this rabbit hole, but I wonder if Hai Lu might manage to pull a rabbit out of his hat.
Wow, I love your office. So what are you working on at the moment, Hai Lu?
I'm working on Ganser's food.
No spring chicken, the 110-million-year-old Gansus holds the record as the oldest known modern bird.
And I can see the foot hiding beneath the sediment
Yeah,
there.
still
That's
there.
stunning.
This duck-like bird lived at the time of the dinosaurs. Hai Lu and his team described it in 2006.
Show you another one. Have a look.
Oh, that is drop-dead gorgeous. Literally drop-dead in this one's case. It's as if though you killed this bird yesterday and squished it into the rock. You see, what I'm really after are the feathers. That's what I've come to find. Because looking at these feathers here, which are definitely not fossil. There, let's look. Red, yellow, pink, blue. We can keep going. It really is a rainbow of colour. But the fossil record is depressingly boring sometimes because you look at these feathers and fossils and think they were drab. I think it's just because we haven't learnt what to look for when we're studying feathers. Because locked within the composition of each of these feathers is a colour signature. And that is what we're after. And I think if we can work out from looking at these modern feathers where the colour is locked into this protein, then imagine unlocking colour in the fossil record. That for me would be so special.
You are lucky. I'll show you something. Look at this one.
Oh, that's beautiful. I've come an awful long way to look at a feather. You can see there's variation in the tone of the fossil. Imagine if that is actual colour. And I think the only way we can test that is by combining the information we learn from living feathers with the equipment that we can really subject this fossil to. You can see each individual filament pulling away from the feather.
Now it's yours.
Thank you. I will look after them so much. Recent studies have given us some insight to dinosaur colour, finding structures that would have held certain pigments. But I'm looking for the actual pigment chemistry, which no one has ever done before.
Usually what's found in China stays in China. But Phil caught a lucky break.
I really lucked out getting the Ganser's feather, but to know more about colour in birds and dinos, I need a dino-like bird.
And this one comes with some serious attitude. Like almost everything else, feathers evolved. Though in the cassowary, they didn't evolve too far. The feisty bird dons the shaggy, retro plumage of a dinosaur.
The feathers are so fine on this animal. They don't look like feathers, it looks like fur. You can't help but think, when you look at a bird like a cassowary, the wonderful colours you see in the throat. Why do we have battleship green and grey dinosaurs? I'd like to see a bright red and blue dinosaur. You don't know whether she's eyeing me up as dinner or as just a potential kicking victim. Either way.
Phil can't resist a closer look at the feathers, so he risks his personal safety to pluck a plume from this most foul-tempered fowl with help from Simon Blackwell.
No worries.
Hey, don't I get a shield?
There's only one, I'm afraid.
You bastard.
So look, if you stay behind
Okay.
until we see what our response is going to be.
Like a fearsome dinosaur, the cassowary can deliver a lethal kick with its dagger-like talon.
She'd love to attack. She may even start calling in a minute.
But before he dies, Phil finds what he's come for.
Ah, hang on.
The one.
That is beautiful.
I think I can put a feather in my cap. Well, I got this vision of very primitive dinosaurs scampering around in the Jurassic with structures almost identical to this.
Cassowaries can't fly, They used their plumage mainly for protection, but nature made feathers multi-purpose. Colorful ones can help attract mates and even tip us off to a bird's health and diet. Flamingos, for instance, get in the pink from a pigment called carotene from the shrimp they eat. So dinosaur feather pigment might tell Phil about dinosaurs' diet, courtship, or environment, if he can manage to pull some pigment from a fossil feather. Without a time machine, we've only just begun to learn about dinosaur color. But Phil and his team now have access to some equipment that might make a time machine seem downright quaint. The synchrotron at the National Accelerator Laboratory is one of the world's most precise imaging machines. It has mapped the surface of viruses and analyzed futuristic materials. So far, the lab's work has earned 6 Nobel Prizes in chemistry and physics. It's been used for everything, it seems, except to study dinosaur fossils. Today at Stanford University, that's about to change. Phil and his team will use it to hunt for dinosaur pigments. It's a long shot, but their work will push paleontology and the synchrotron to their limits. Inspiration struck when the machine recovered a priceless 2,250-year-old text by Greek mathematician Archimedes. Arguably the most brilliant mathematical mind of all time, Archimedes wrote technical treatises that formed the foundation of modern mathematics. Then, in a tragic incident of recycling gone wrong, 1,000 years ago, monks scrubbed the ink off what's now the last remaining copy and reused the pages to compose a prayer book. All that remained of Archimedes' great work was a vague shadow, a palimpsest, like the ghost images left behind on a chalkboard after it's erased. But the synchrotron's high-power, all-seeing rays homed in on the otherwise undetectable chemical traces of the ink and brought Archimedes' lost work back from the dead. Compared to fossils, Archimedes' book is hot off the press. The odds that any pigment chemical survived 150 million years are vanishingly low. But Phil and his team will take those odds. If they succeed, they'll prove that there's more to fossil feathers than just impressions in stone. That idea won the team access in the first place. Scientists from around the world bombard Stanford with requests for synchrotron beam time. The machine books up fast, and running it costs a few $1,000s a day.
The level of complexity looks overwhelming.
Complexity is kind of staggering as you look at it here.
But because Stanford recognizes this potentially history-making moment, they've offered Phil and his team access for a few days. Now the pressure's really on, and Phil decides to up the ante.
I'm probably daft, but I would love to put the Ganser's feather aside for a while and start our first experiment with a truly prized specimen.
He'll chase what's perhaps the most iconic fossil of all time, a fossil that has already changed history once, the Archaeopteryx. Phil heads to Bavaria, Germany, ground zero for one of paleontology's great turning points. It's here, in the Solnhofen limestone, that a quarry worker discovered Archaeopteryx, half bird, half dinosaur, in 1861. Just 2 years after Darwin published his Origin of Species, this magpie-sized bird with teeth, this dinosaur with wings, provided the first hard evidence that some dinosaurs had evolved into birds. Scientists have pored over the Archaeopteryx fossil for 150 years. But Phil's the first to study its chemical composition and maybe determine its color. To learn how it became such a pristine fossil, he talks with Archaeopteryx expert Dino Frey.
If you imagine that these animals probably lived on the islands
and on a kind of an archipelago, which was along the seam of the mainland. And they were close to each other. They were the heads of reef bodies, yeah, with plants, with nice things, but not big raptors. This would be an ideal breeding place for them. Yeah, they could live there, they could breed there, and would do babies and hatchlings and young animals. They explore. And sometimes they might have explored a little too far. And you can visualize Daddy standing on the shore and say, "I told you not to fly out so far. And now you're drowned."
Bad news for the Archaeopteryx, but a boon for paleontologists. When the dust settled, the fine-grained silt exquisitely preserved the bones and feathery outlines for 150 million years.
I wonder if the fossilization process might have preserved some colour remnant from Archaeopteryx that the synchrotron might help reveal.
That depends on how quickly and gently the Archaeopteryx fossilized. The finer the sediment, the better it preserves fossil details. Fortunately, the sediment that entombed Archaeopteryx was like a natural plaster of Paris, chewed into fine powder by bacteria.
The amount of bacteria that lived in this soup must have been tremendous. And then the bacteria produce a sediment which is so fine-grained that every animal that touches down on the ground is immediately covered with mud.
And that quick and dirty process may have captured the color chemicals in the skin and feathers of Archaeopteryx.
There's a few.
Phil and Dino pour sand to recreate Archaeopteryx's post-mortem adventure.
I'm building the Zonhofen Lagoon.
Nature locked the fossil in an airless tomb. And then storms washed down heavy clays to seal its fate.
Here, I have a storm event.
So you're a storm event?
I am a storm event because there are layers in between that come from somewhere with sands and clays that fill complete layers.
Entombed in its sedimentary deathbed, the Archaeopteryx quietly passed millions of years as more muck piled on top, compressing the fossil and turning it to stone. Unlike the scrambled bones of China's dinosaur city, the Archaeopteryx came out of the earth exactly as it had gone in. And that's exactly what Phil had hoped to find here.
The bones and some of the feathers of Archaeopteryx fossilized beautifully, but what became of the soft parts? The chemicals that once made up the flesh and feathers of Archaeopteryx, and colour, what became of that?
Based on the way Archaeopteryx fossilized, Phil's confident some of it is still there. Few have ever thought about this fossil like that before.
The key thing then is to understand what's happening to the elements within the body of our animal and the sediment surrounding it, and seeing how the elements are flowing in and out of this system. If you can nail that, you can understand something about the preservation of this animal.
Yeah, I would dream of understanding such a system, but will yield much more information than we can see with our naked eye.
That's where the synchrotron comes in. If Phil and his team can use it to find color chemicals in the Archaeopteryx fossil, the team will have pulled off more than they had ever dreamt possible. And Archaeopteryx will touch off yet another scientific revolution. Now that Phil has a handle on how Archaeopteryx became a fossil, he's ready to see the real thing for the first time.
Pete. Hello. Good to see you.
It's one of only 10 specimens ever found, escorted to the synchrotron lab by paleontologist Pete Larson.
Is that it?
That's it.
No, you're joking.
Archaeopteryx packed light because it can't stay long. The team will have to work fast.
I can't believe that 150 million years in the making. It's probably the most iconic fossil on the planet. And you were carrying it in the back of your car like that.
But we were disguised, you see.
Okay, that makes it okay. Well, let's get it inside without any ado. That's amazing. And in the UK,
Described in 2005, this particular fossil, called the Thermopolis Archaeopteryx, is the second most complete specimen in the world.
It's here, the beastie. It's rare that I'm lost for words, but this is one of these fossils which just is almost too perfect. Yeah. And unbelievably beautiful. I just think in terms of information that can be gleaned from a single Archaeopteryx fossil, this is the one I would have chosen for the process that you have so kindly offered us to deploy.
We will really...
Uwe Bergmann, head physicist at Stanford's Accelerator Lab, leads the team.
Where you don't see that much. I'm really interested in what we are going to see once we let these X-rays shine on and scan it across.
For me, you have frozen in time a fossil that has both these obvious reptilian characters and the avian characters, bird-like characters. It's as if though someone has stuffed a bird up the backside of a dinosaur. It is the dino bird, and there's no other way of describing it. I just love seeing a wishbone. It's ridiculous. The wishbone is so clear. I wonder what you'd have pulled this wishbone for. Well, it's actually, I can imagine a few wishes, and hopefully the next few days I'll be able to sort of, well, some of them will come true.
The fossil's extraordinary condition is a good sign. No one has varnished or treated the stone with harmful preservatives. But there's no guarantee that there's anything left for the synchrotron to find. On the synchrotron's 230-meter-long track, magnets propel electrons at nearly the speed of light. It's exciting for the electrons. Every change of direction jolts them into shedding X-rays. And because the synchrotron uses powerful magnets, the electrons constantly change direction. The light from the synchrotron can burn 100 million times brighter than the sun. No wonder it can see so well.
To get an idea of the forces involved with particles slamming around an accelerator, I need an extremely fast car. In this case, a Porsche. Let's go for it.
Speeding down a straight track has its thrills. But spinning can be gut-wrenching. And when electrons feel sick, they vomit X-rays. Like a Porsche traveling through an obstacle course, the synchrotron uses magnets to make the electrons wiggle through the track, or they can be crashed into targets. Deep inside the security zone, the team preps the synchrotron. They'll need 5 days to get things right before any wiggling or crashing can begin.
Go to the start position and see whether that's still a good start position.
Yeah, it's good. No, it's still touching. Now it's away.
I think this is good.
It'll take a day and a half just to get Archaeopteryx ready for the spotlight.
What I did, by the way, I increased the flow a little bit. Okay. Could then in the head reconstruct it.
Then Newton's law gets trumped by Murphy's law. On day 2, the computer crashes.
You think you've had the blue screen of death on your computer before? Try that with 6. It's not easy.
Yeah, right. So let's just start to rotate it. Move towards you, and so don't pull on the arc. Don't pull. Yeah, pull only on the stage. You just.
And despite the fancy hardware, the fate of this million-dollar research project might ultimately hinge on a wad of bubblegum.
It'll keep it for a little bit. Okay, so let's go for it.
It'll keep it a little bit before we scan.
Let's just start that scan.
The last 5 days have been a grueling ordeal for the team, but the Archaeopteryx has been waiting 150 million years for this. Now, after seemingly endless measuring and testing, the team's ready to start the scan.
We're going to interlock now. This is an interlock system.
Finding color is a shot in the dark, so they first set the synchrotron to search for one of the most common chemicals in the body, phosphorus. If the scanned image illuminates the fossilized bones, it'll prove there's a chance of finding something even more elusive. The chemicals of color. And that will be a first. The scan begins, revealing Archaeopteryx as no one has ever seen it before.
You have tremendous detail. You can see all the detail in the teeth, and then you can see these details.
You can actually see the elemental signature of the feather. Absolutely gobsmacking. That is amazing.
Yeah.
The fact you can see the spacing in between the individual feathers as well. It looks like there's not been that much movement. It wasn't completely pulled apart when the animal rested at the bottom of that lagoon.
These aren't just enhanced views of the Archaeopteryx fossil. They're the actual phosphorus stain its bones left behind.
We are almost looking at dinosaur CSI for the very first time. The initial work we've been doing has shown us clearly we can see the structure and maybe even the original composition of some of the feathers. And what about something as elusive as colour? There is a small chance, but it's one I'm willing to bet on.
The synchrotron proved for the first time that these fossil bones left phosphorus behind. Now comes the hard part. Can it shine a light on the chemicals left by color? They give it a try, but the initial scans on the Archaeopteryx don't reveal any chemicals that might suggest color. So Phil and the team look to the Gansus feather, his gift from China. It's younger than the Archaeopteryx feathers and may have a better chance of holding the secret ingredients of color. If they can only figure out what chemicals to look for. They start by studying modern animals. Over the eons, the players might have changed, but the rules of survival haven't. In courtship or camouflage, color plays a role.
In order to understand colour on its most basic level, I have to get a handle on how nature uses it.
To do that, Phil has to think like a dinosaur. Animals, like people, must dress for success. Imagine if one of nature's most voracious predators got a craving for you. You'd want to fade into the background. It doesn't take military intelligence to figure that out. Phil, facing great personal risk to his pride, gets stalked by a paintball team and a dinosaur-sized tank. Borrowing from nature, soldiers use disruptive camouflage, breaking up their silhouette with patches of color. Also inspired by nature, Phil's paintball partner and dinosaur illustrator, Luis Rey, has used his artistic license to depict dinosaur camouflage patterns.
I want to see them as live animals, as animals alive, and being part of their environment, blending with the environment, fighting in their environment, mating in their environment, and for that you need colors.
Fossil plants can be a tip-off to the kind of background dinosaurs tried to blend into, just as the spots of a giraffe blend into the sun-dappled savanna. Unfortunately, Phil's camouflage has failed him.
That's the last time I go painting with you. I'm not going to be the bloody canvas again. Jeez.
But dinosaurs may have seen things differently. Birds, reptiles, and amphibians all share the same family tree with dinosaurs. And although we've got great color vision, theirs is even better. We see a combination of 4 colors. They can recognize many more, including infrared and ultraviolet. It allows infrared color wars between the hunter and the hunted to extend into the night. It also raises questions about what color chemicals or pigments Phil needs to look for.
What if pigments we can no longer see are the ones that have the best chance of surviving the fossilization process.
Like a night vision camera, some snakes perceive a type of light called infrared, invisible to humans. It lets them hunt frogs in the dark. But some frogs don a cloak of invisibility.
So that means that these are effectively camouflaged from predators as well.
Exactly.
Andrew Gray, an expert on reptiles and frogs, shows Phil how pigment can provide light armor against enemy ambush.
So here we can see with the camera there the green frog on the green leaf. But as soon as we switch it into night mode, which basically gives us the infrared view, we can see that frog matches the leaf absolutely perfectly.
Now you see me, now you don't.
It's amazing. But if we get another frog that doesn't have the pigment in its skin onto the leaf, then we look into the infrared camera and we can see straight away which one's got the infrared pigment in its skin.
And since dinosaurs, reptiles and amphibians share a family tree, some dinosaurs might have had infrared vision too. But why stop there? A look at their modern descendants, the birds, sheds light on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Martin, this is the coldest office in Christendom. What on earth have you got me freezing my butt off out here for?
Martin Stevens studies how birds see. They can see many more colours than we can, plus ultraviolet. And since dinosaurs are bird ancestors, they might have seen it first. A UV camera gives us an idea of a bird's eye view of a peacock feather.
It's simply a camera with a special lens and a filter that lets the ultraviolet light enter and then takes a photograph.
Fantastic.
So we can do that.
Oh wow, that is really distinct.
The ultraviolet camera exposes an invisible white streak.
It's like Austin Powers' Yeah Baby colour vision for birds.
So if dinosaurs had different patterns in ultraviolet, this is how the world might have looked through the eyes of a stalking Tyrannosaurus Rex.
All this confirms the dinosaur world must have been really colourful, but I still need to know more about the chemistry of colour.
To understand how colour works in the body, Phil pays a visit to the Leonardo of lizards. The chameleon. Maybe this quick change artist has a few tricks to show Phil about pigments.
Oh, these are amazing, these creatures. These panther chameleons.
Andrew Gray explains the chameleon's colour change in black and white. Contrary to popular belief, chameleons don't really change colour to match the wallpaper. Mostly they changed to communicate to other chameleons.
This is a female of the same species, and you can see here they look very, very different. Let's just see what sort of reaction we get there.
Oh, don't bite. Be nice. See,
You
there's
can see the orange there, especially up underneath there, can you see?
Oh, wow.
Can you see the eyes changing colour?
Hey, your luck's in, mate. Keep flashing those eyelids, you don't know where it's going to get you. So these guys are getting it on just with colour.
Yeah.
When you look at the external shape and structure of the skin, is there anything to tell you that it has this unique capability of changing colour?
Well, the skin itself is quite unusual with chameleon. It's actually quite transparent, and it needs to be that way so that it allows the colours from the different layers to be able to be seen.
That translucent skin makes it easy to study the little paint pots of colour cells in each skin layer. All reptiles have them, and they're even more common in bird feathers.
I wonder if the dinosaurs would have done this. That would have been terrifyingly beautiful. Off you go. What a star.
Though a psychedelic, colour-changing dinosaur is probably over the top, it's a good bet that lots of dinosaurs flash their colours to attract mates. Nowadays, dinosaur illustrators use bright display colours to lift their creations off the page. Of course, choosing the right colours is still mostly a pigment of the imagination. but Phil's team hopes to find the actual pigments. Now that he's seen how animals depend on color, Phil needs to focus on the chemistry of color, where it comes from, and what it might leave behind when it goes. With the Archaeopteryx, Phil proved that chemicals from dinosaur bone survive in fossils.
I'm confident that some remnant of their colour remains there too, especially in fossil feathers. I wonder, could the Ganz's fossil hold the evidence to unlock the colourful world of dinosaurs?
As anyone who does laundry knows, some colours survive wash day better than others. But even if he can find a colour chemical, how will Phil recognize it when he sees it? Phil will start by sorting his colours, because colour comes in two forms. One is chemical pigmentation, like the dyes in clothes or paint on houses. The other kind of colour is really a trick of the light, like the colours in a soap bubble. The thin, clear skin of a bubble splits light into rainbows. That's called structural colour. Nature uses it to great effect on butterflies. Some of the really dazzling ones have no pigment. Their thin scales reflect light into beautiful patterns, which we see as mainly blue. But Phil's not chasing butterflies. He's focusing on chemical pigments, which mostly show up as nature's browns, oranges, or reds.
If I stick to the very basic colours, I can start to narrow down the list of chemicals to look for in the Ganz's feather, assuming any of them remain.
Phil becomes a pigment PI, investigating in the same way the police search for chemical clues at the scene of a crime.
If we're looking at the hair, I want to find out if this comes
Megan McLean teaches CSI forensics, staging murder scenarios for her students.
The main thing when we come to a crime scene is we hope that we've preserved the evidence.
For me, though, what's really hard is my stuff has got trashed over millions of years. You've got a fairly pristine crime scene.
I don't envy you your task, because that's one of the things in forensic science and in a scene like this is you try to protect the scene.
After Phil's paintball attack, he washed his spattered camouflage jacket, destroying the colour evidence. Or so he thinks.
3 days ago, a heinous crime took place where I was shot.
Phil wants to see how Megan applies forensics to crack the case of the covert colour sample.
Can we see anything which might give you clues as to what I was shot with?
At the moment, all I can see is, under this magnification, are the fibres, the weave, and some of the basic colour of the camouflage jacket. Not much success there, I'm afraid.
So I might have got away with the crime?
I wish I could say that. We have more than one instrument that can look at this.
Megan's electron microscope helps unravel the fabric's mystery.
The beauty of this instrument is that we can get greater and greater magnification. We begin to see some globules trapped between two fibres.
The globules clearly don't belong in the fabric.
But we need to look now even further at the chemical composition of this.
So it's not just about imaging what you think is represented as colour, it's as much about the chemistry.
It's so dangerous to draw conclusions from just this image. You can't prosecute somebody on the basis of this.
In her crime lab, Megan uses a spectroscope to identify the globules as pink paint, because their chemical fingerprint matches a known paint sample. Back at his lab in Manchester, England, Phil will use similar forensic techniques to look for traces of pigments in the Ganz's fossil. First, he has to know what pigment chemicals to look for by studying actual feathers. Good thing the team's done its homework. those field trips to study modern animals uncovered a living bird with an easy-to-isolate pigment in its feathers. This plucky bird, the African turaku, was once the darling of Victorian scientists and might be Phil's hero today.
Well, it's a relatively simple experiment, but...
Geochemist Roy Wojelius demonstrates how the turaku's superpowers reside in its incredible, but not indelible, plumage.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take this relatively strong chemical, we'll dip the feather into it, and you'll see it leach out into the beaker. And you can see.
Finest pink, my lord. Unbelievable.
So literally the structure of the feather's getting a kicking and it's releasing the colour.
That's right.
So what on earth were Victorians doing with feathers and strong chemicals?
They were actually trying to make inexpensive chemical dyes. And so they'd worked out a way to extract the pigment from these turaco feathers. In fact, this is one of the first chemical pigments that people have actually worked out the structure of.
And they found that the red pigment contained a distinct copper compound.
Since birds, including the turaco, descended from dinosaurs, then the turaco feather might have inherited the same pigments as fossils over 100 million years ago.
So Phil will look for traces of copper in the Gansus feather.
When we're finished...
Since he'll be hunting samples much smaller than a paint speck, his team needs a much bigger and infinitely more sensitive spectrometer than Megan relied on. They'll turn to a crime lab device called FTIR. It also uses infrared light to determine what something, such as a feather, is made of. Every substance absorbs and reflects infrared light differently, like a fingerprint. The FTIR reads those prints. Now, unlikely as it sounds, Phil fires up the FTIR to try to lift the chemical fingerprint from his fossil Gansus feather. Phil hopes the infrared rays of the FTIR peel back time to reveal the organic compounds connected to copper that may remain in the fossil feather.
Just a whiff of the breakdown products left.
So after 110 million years, something is still stuck to the rock, which was originally the sediment where the animal went squish into it.
Phil believes the chemical fingerprinting of the turaku feather in the FTIR shows chemical remains in exactly the same place as in the fossil.
This is just incredible.
Phil and Roy suspect those chemicals in the Gansus are from a pigment. Phil sends the turaku feather and the Gansus fossil to the Stanford synchrotron. When they review the results back in Manchester, it appears the finely tuned X-rays confirm the presence of copper pigment in both.
And what they're showing you is the distribution of these different elements in the feather. So you can see, this is the copper in the turaco feather.
Gansus passed the test with flying colors. Phil and Roy can safely speculate they're looking at organic fossil pigments for the first time ever.
For me, unlocking the colour of extinct organisms has always been one of these goals that I thought we'd never achieve. But here I'm sat, talking to you about unlocking the palette of colour in extinct animals.
Against the odds, Phil and Roy found copper. So, like the turaku, the Gansus may have sported red plumage, but the quest for colour is still ongoing. It's great progress. Illustrators can showcase dinosaurs and prehistoric birds in living colour with more accuracy than ever before. The Gansus breakthrough may expand our knowledge across the age of dinosaurs to reveal them as they really were. We could see how dinosaurs used colour for camouflage, how they used it to attract mates, and how then, as now, colour is key to survival. But beyond that, Phil and his team have shown something even greater. Technology has helped them prove that within the fossil lies the chemical ghost of the actual creature that perished there millions of years ago.